a good time talking, I could tell. Don't lie, I heard it. No, I'm just kidding. Hey guys, we're in for a treat tonight. Sterling, actually we connected only just a few months ago. He's like, I'm trying to get some water. Hey look guys, what just happened, this is always everyone's, this is always everyone's favorite kind of, the networking party. It's so powerful. Guys, I was telling some people, on nights like this, like in rooms like this, and like I said, I traveled to the South Shore, I traveled to, I've got to get up to his in Baton Rouge, the ones in Mississippi. I traveled to them because relationship capital has been a huge part of my journey. And what that means is it's really the relationships I've made, the financial friends I've made. I've found in these rooms over the years, I have found business partners, I have found private lenders, I have found deals, whether it's people who I buy from or people who I sell to, all of that. You never know who you're going to find, or critical parts to my team. So Sterling, we connected a few months ago. It might be longer than that, who knows?
We can check on your episode of the Little Radio Show.
Because it was right before that. I remember walking through Home Depot talking to you, and I was like, not getting anything done in that Home Depot. I just pulled along in the garden side section, and I was like, because we just got chatting, it was good. So real quick, tell people about the Red Radio podcast.
So it's a podcast on the Red Radio Show. It's,
Whoa.
I mean, it's about I've been interviewing real estate investors nationally since 2019. So we've got 130 something episodes released. We've had some big ticket folks on there. I interviewed the CEO of Bigger Pockets, Jay Scott, who wrote the book on flipping houses, a lot of big time apartment syndicators. So it's been fun. I enjoyed it, but to Courtney's point, the whole thing is a relationship business. I mean that's and anything you can do to continue to foster those relationships is what's going to drive you forward in success. Every single person that brought me a deal, that funded my deal, that fixed up my deal, that financed my deal, that managed my deal, they all came from these types of events. And all the mentors and other people that have helped me along the way I met from interviewing them on podcasts, or they heard my podcast and they reached out.
So right now, you're based out of Baton Rouge, yep. Right? Can you tell me real quick about the Red Stick REIA as well?
Sure. So me and my friend John, who heard that she was having so much success with this REIA, decided he wanted to copy it. So I used to go to a REIA when I first started, because when you first start getting interested in real estate investing, you probably if you Google anything about real estate investing, it inevitably will direct you to Bigger Pockets. And then if you ever listen to some of those podcasts, they'll pretty quickly tell you to go find a local meetup. So I did. I went to meetup.com and ended up at the local Baton Rouge real estate meetup, which was called the Ring Meetup. And then I went there several times and I met people that helped me get started. And then COVID happened and they stopped having meetups. And they stopped for 2 years. And my friend John, who I actually, he was listening to my podcast. He worked with my mom. And he went to my mom and said, actually, I've been listening to your son's podcast. Can I meet him? So that's how we became friends.
Because John's based out of Hammond.
John lives in Baton Rouge, but he went to Southeastern.
Yeah.
And he invests a lot. His brother's his partner, and he lives in Hammond. So they buy a bunch of properties in Hammond. And so he wanted to start a meetup. So we started Red Stick REIA in August, I think. And we've had one every month. We have about 60 people come out each month. It's been really great. We don't pitch anything, we're just a bunch of investors trying to help each other out.
So when do you guys meet? Once a month? When?
It's the first Wednesday of every month at the Crown Plaza, right at the College Drive exit, and it's 6:30 to 8.
Yeah. So I've actually been. I tried making it last Wednesday when they all had it. So here's the thing: is those different meetups, and they can be critical. So look, I don't want to hold him back. I want to let him get to sharing, but Do you want them to hold their questions through the end?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you guys, I know you guys get on the edge of your seats and you're like, hey, I wanna know, a little bit, write down your question. At the end, he's gonna take the Q&A so that he can kind of share more of his story and kind of get that momentum before the end, okay? I'm gonna let Sterling go ahead and go on with it. And so, do you want to kind of show them?
Is that where you're recording?
Yes, because I've got to do it in case you
This
move.
is really my good side.
Well, if you want to talk back, no. This is for in case you walk, right? By the way, you've got about a dozen people watching you.
Oh, nice.
And so-
Yeah, more than that here. It's so weird because I've told this story a million times on like podcast interviews, but I'm like, even though hundreds or thousands of people listen to it, it's just me and the one person in the room, on the little Zoom meeting, and it's less intimidating than a big crowd. But thank you so much for having me. So my story is, I think it's pretty common. It's so common that BRRRR keeps rejecting my application, saying that there's nothing unique about it. So what I wanted, my whole life I wanted to grow up and be Mr. Corporate America. That's kind of always what I envisioned success to be. And so I went to school for finance and then ended up selling insurance outside of, when I got at LSU for a couple of years, and eventually found my way into Telcom and decided I wanted to be like the next, I always say, next CFO of AT&T. And so I went back and got my MBA. I moved up really quickly, and I was really poised for this huge career with AT&T. And then things kind of started to change. And like in 2017, I was finishing my MBA, and I took an entrepreneurship class, and it was like, man, I'd really love to go like do something for myself. At the time, I was like, I was working 80 hours a week, but it was all going to the man. And like, if I did like a really good job, they would just like turn up the treadmill the next month. Like, oh, you can run fast. and so I started to grow resentful of that, and so I started to, but I didn't really like know how to do anything. Like I worked in Telcom, and I didn't know how to even start a router company. So I started reading personal finance books, and also at the same time, in late 2017, my boss, who had been with the company for like 17 years, won award trips, all these accolades. Well, when you work for these big corporations, they do periodic layoffs, and he just, when the music stopped, he was in a bad spot one month, and after 17 years, he didn't have a job anymore. And so I envisioned like myself being in like my mid-40s with kids in private school and mortgages and car notes, and this company I dedicated my life to for all these years, it just turned the faucet off, and like it just freaked me out. So I got to figure out how to do something else, or backup plan. So my initial like interest in real estate was really, I just wanted to get a little cash flow, so like in case I got laid off, I could at least like pay my bills and not like get kicked out of my house. And so the first book I read was The No Debt Guy, Dave Ramsey, and I went to my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and I was like, look, we're never gonna have any credit cards and blah 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 blah. And she said, yeah, okay, whatever. And then a week later, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I was like, scratch that, we're doing Rich Dad. She's like, okay, whatever. And then I stumbled on, and anybody who's read Rich Dad Poor Dad, they talk a lot about real estate investing and all the benefits and the cash flow and appreciation and the tax benefits and all that kind of stuff. And if you haven't read Rich Dad Poor Dad, you should go read it. But that kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of all the different, Rich Dad books and all the different real estate books and BRRRR. And so that was in February of 2018. And I finally bought my first single-family rental in August of 2018. I'd saved up like $14,000 and put it as a down payment for a $72,000 house in Baker. It was a good deal, at the time. I think I still haven't made money on that house. It's doubled in value, but I had to replace a sewer line and this and that. But it was enough to get started. I always tell people, like, go, just, it doesn't matter if you lose money on the first year, just go do something. It's like much more important that you start. So I bought that one. It was like, I put $14,000 down. It was a $72,000 house. My note, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance was $560. I rented it out for $1,060. I was like, woo, I'm making $500 a month. Again, I probably still haven't made $500 a month 3.5 years later. But I bought another house the same exact way a month later in Baton Rouge, and for $76,000, I think I put 18 down, and it ran for $11.85, and I think I've done well on that one. I still have the same tenant that moved in the summer of 2018. But anyway, I was out of money. I like that. I mean, that was more than my life savings. That, like, the first house I had saved that $14,000. The second house I had borrowed it from my mom and paid her back like over like 9 months. I gave her like $2,000 a month. So I was like negative in my cash reserves at that point. And I remember like getting pissed off because I couldn't go buy more real estate. And I remember like turning off the podcast and the books because like it would make me irritated. Like, man, I have to save for another 2 years to get another down payment, you know? And then I kind of came across the concepts of low and no money down investing, specifically like private money lenders and the BRRRR strategy. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, it's when you buy it well below market value, renovate it, refinance it, put a renter in it to pay the note back, and you basically recycle the same money over and over again. And that's what I ultimately ended up doing was recycling money over and over again and buying a bunch of houses. But the first one was I had no money, no experience because I didn't renovate those first 2 houses, no contacts, no track record. I had a friend of a friend that I reached out to because he flipped houses, and I just wanted to like network with somebody who knew something about real estate investing. And he was like, well, if you want to buy rentals, I can like flip a rental to you, I was like, eh. But anyway, so I went and I found these 2 duplexes. They were next door to each other on Meadow Park in Baton Rouge. And one of them was flooded, like it had gotten a little water, had maybe like the bottom 2 feet gutted. The other one was next door. It didn't get water, but it was trash from the previous tenant. And they had long since been abandoned. And there was like a phone number like stapled to the door. So I called the phone number. Anyway, I got these duplexes under contract for $190,000. Now I didn't have $190,000. I had no idea how I was going to buy it, but I thought that if they were fixed up, they would be worth like close to $400,000. So I went to my buddy that flipped houses because I knew he had investors that funded his houses getting flipped. And so I went to him and I said, look, I got this contract, but I can't buy it, but I'll make you a deal. If you use your investors to buy these duplexes and you use your contractors to fix them up, I'll pay back your investors and all the fix-up costs, and I'll give you $50,000 just for doing it. And he was like, okay. And it wasn't quite that smooth. We spent about 12 hours in the title attorney's office arguing over how we were going to draw up this contract because there was a lot of moving parts to it. And then like his investor didn't have all the money, so I had to get like, my brother had $40,000. I was like, I'll give you 20% on that money if you let me borrow it for 6 months. And so that was like the final piece. But anyway, my buddy who flipped houses bought the house with his investor's capital and my brother's capital. When they bought the duplexes, they added me to the title. So they fixed it up. The investor funded the fixing it up. He oversaw the contractors and everything. And then once it was all done, I went to my small local bank and I said, hey, I'm on the title for these 2 duplexes that I think are worth about $400 grand. Can you give me an 80% cash out refinance from it? And they were like, okay. And they go and appraise the duplexes, and they appraised for $195,000 each. So they appraised for $390,000. Well, 80% of $390,000 is $312,000. So they gave me a check for $312,000. I paid off the investor. I paid back my brother. I paid my friend his $50,000, and they transferred all the title into my name. And I walked away with $78,000 in equity and 2 duplexes that cash flowed almost $2,000 a month. So I was like, that's really cool, because before I did that, my net worth was like 20 grand. So I effectively like quadrupled it in a couple months. And I was like, I gotta keep doing this. And I didn't right away, because I was still scared and I still doubted myself, and the construction and the under, it's just, you hear all these horror stories, and I was just afraid of these big renovations. And in retrospect, I don't know what I was afraid of. They're really not that complicated. Houses are basically just like sticks with paper on the outside and stuffing on the inside, and wires run through it. Really,
Just a little bit of that.
it's really not that complicated. It's been my experience, but back then I was terrified, and it wasn't my money, so I was even more terrified I was going to lose somebody else's money. So I was looking for more creative ways, because I still didn't really, like, I had the equity, but I didn't have a lot of cash. My brother was pretty happy that I gave him like $6,000 for him not doing anything. That money was sitting in his bank account before. So he was like, well, let's go partner on some more. So I found this gentleman that had some dilapidated old duplexes and fourplexes listed by LSU, and I just reached out to him to talk and see what he wanted. And he wasn't interested in selling them outright, because he had 1031'd and deferred for years and years. He was like 75, and he wanted to get out of managing them, but he didn't want to take the tax hit of selling it all at once. So it was a really good option for him to seller finance them to. So I took my brother's money and put 10% down, and then he seller financed me the other 90%, and we bought a fourplex and 2 duplexes. We were 50-50 partners, and I managed them, and I got them, I found them, and we still have those 8 units today. And then from there, I just developed a relationship with the guy, and he ended up seller financing me another several duplexes and fourplexes, and so I ended up with a bunch of units that I managed myself, and was pulling my hair out trying to manage all these units myself. I think I had 26 in late 2019, and I had a newborn baby, and I had this day job, and I was pulling my hair out, and that was when I started the podcast, and I turned my properties over to property management. And when I did that, things really started to take off. Just through not managing the properties, I had a lot more bandwidth to focus on the acquisition side and the strategy side. I've said a million times, if I didn't turn those properties over to property management in early 2020, I would still have 26 properties today. But and then the podcast just allowed me to interview a bunch of other successful investors, kind of built up my confidence, seeing it over and over again. And I started in 2020, I started borrowing more houses. So basically I borrowed money from private money lenders that wanted to invest with me. And I told them, give me $100,000, I'll give you 120 at the end of the year. Give you 20% for your money. And I'm like, that's great. But I remember my first BRRRR 2020, I bought the house for a wholesaler brought it to me. I've never done any direct marketing to the owners. I have wholesalers bring me all my deals.
That's actually a really small statement he just said, but it's a really big deal.
But I bought it for $65. I spent $25 fixing it up. So I was all into this house for $90 grand, and then it appraised for $130. So I went to the bank and I said, hey, give me 80%, which is like $96,000 or $103,000. He's $103,000. So not only did I get all my money back out, but I got like extra money back out. And so then I used that to buy the next house for 75 grand. I put like 40 into it. It appraised for 209. And so then I did a cash out refinance and pulled 167 out. Every time I did a cash out refinance and pulled the money back out, I put a tenant in there to pay the mortgage I just took out, and then some, right? So, so I did 4 in 2020, and then in 2021, I syndicated an apartment complex with some partners, and then I did, I think, 18 or 19 more houses like that, and then in 2022 so far, I've bought 9 houses in the last 3 months, and we bought another apartment complex. So I think that's just the story. Is there any specific stuff you wanted me to dive into?
Yeah, so talk about, so first of all, well, how about we do this? Let's ask some questions. So you guys, he's sharing his journey, but it's, as you guys know, it's impressive, right? For example, in this really hot market, to buy 3 houses a month is not easy, okay? On top of that, having a full-time job, a growing, family, all of those things, you're still actively building this portfolio. So I want to give you guys some time to ask some questions. Anyone else who's listening on the live stream, if you have a question, ask them. I don't mind asking questions too, but I know you guys probably have some about the specifics as well.
What mistakes have you made?
All of them. So,
Could you repeat the question? I'm
Yes.
sorry.
she asked, what mistakes have I made?
Oh, all of them.
So, the first house that I bought, and first of all, everybody thought I was crazy when I started to buy real estate, especially when I started to focus on it instead of my great job that everybody thought I should love so much. But the first house, I paid the $14,000 or whatever I'd saved up, and I thought everything was good. I even got it inspected by a professional inspector, but somehow he missed. There was like some plumbing issue that ended up costing me like $3 grand. Well, I didn't have $3 grand because I had just spent all my money as a down payment. So I put it on a credit card, and I didn't tell my wife for like several years because I couldn't handle I told you so stuff. And then I think a year later, I found out I had to replace the whole sewer line, which was another $8,000. So, I mean, I don't know that like I said. Now, I will say that since I bought that house, it just recently appraised for $140, and so did the second house that I bought. So, the cash flow has been up and down, but they doubled in value. So that was one mistake I made. Another mistake I made is a lot of times in the early days I would try and haggle because I was insecure about my numbers, and I don't know what it's really going to be worth. I don't know how much it's really going to cost to fix. So when the wholesalers would send me deals, I would try and haggle them down, and I can't count the number of times I lost $50,000 trying to save $5.
Mm-hmm.
When now my policy is if it works, I don't haggle. I don't try and get I have a very clear threshold. I want to be all into a property for 70% of the ARV. If I can be all into the property for 70% of the ARV, I don't try and negotiate below that and end up blowing the deal, because I mean, you do. You end up losing it to the guy down the street who knows better than to lose that $50,000 trying to save that $5.
Where are you getting most of your wholesaling from? Like, do you have like a specific group you go to for your wholesaling, or like?
For my wholesale.
For your wholesaling, like, is there like a specific group that you go to for?
So, no.
Can you explain for those who might not know, can you explain what a wholesaler is? Do you feel comfortable doing that?
Yeah. I mean, I've never been a wholesaler, so maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. But my understanding is that a wholesaler direct markets to distressed homeowners, whether it be a succession, a divorce, a bankruptcy, a foreclosure. typically there's these situations where an owner is distressed and it is more advantageous for them to sell quickly for cash without making any improvements than it would to go the typical route of fixing it up and listening with the realtor. I was trying to explain this concept to my realtor the other day, because he's like, man, I mean, isn't that wholesaling thing, it sounds like you're taking advantage of the people. I'm like, well, Leo, the last house that when you told me to sell my house, the first thing you did was have me spend $20,000 fixing it up, and then it took you 4 months to sell it. So like somebody who's going to get foreclosed on next week doesn't really have, you know what I mean, you getting them out of that foreclosure, they don't have a bankruptcy on their record for the next 10 years, is a pretty good option, and it beats the alternative of just not having that option. So, but anyway, most of the wholesalers, from my understanding, don't have the capacity to close, or they choose not to. They have other projects, so what they'll do is they'll strike a deal with this distressed homeowner, where they'll say, hey, and I'll get this closed. We'll give you cash in the next 15 days. Well, I don't have the cash, but they know I have the cash. So they turn around and they bring the contract to me and they say, Sterling, I'll sign this contract to you. Just give me $5,000 and I'll give you the contract. And then I go buy the house from the direct. But so that's what a wholesaler does, is they kind of
find opportunities and they sell their position in that opportunity.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's the textbook.
When do they get their $5,000?
At
Closing or?
At closing.
Okay.
So
No, you don't want to pay it before closing,
you
for
definitely
sure.
don't pay.
Because a lot can go wrong between a contract to close.
A lot.
Ask me how I know.
So I have 15, 16 different wholesalers. I don't know that I've bought more than 2 deals from any of them.
Okay.
So the idea of the silver bullet wholesaler is just,
Where do you go to find them?
I mean, I host a meetup.
So they come to meetings.
They come to meetings. I met the first ones at meetings,
So you attended other meetings that you didn't host.
I attended other meetings that I didn't host, and that was where I found
How
them.
many people in this room is a wholesaler right now would consider themselves? Less than a few of my deals I wholesale, right? So they're in this room. Now tonight, we're not necessarily talking a deal that's exactly wholesale specific, right? Any given chance there's wholesalers in these rooms, but if we specifically talk about wholesaling, like 50% of the room's a wholesaler sometimes. But I'll tell you this, when it comes to wholesalers, the golden rule is trust but verify. I've sold a handful of you guys some wholesale deals over the years. I was first a flipper. I added in wholesaling. 2019, probably 60% of my deals were flips and wholesales. This year is less than 20% of my deals are wholesales or flips. So it's like, you're going to have people who vary. There's some people who 100% of what they do is wholesale. So it's going to vary. You always want to trust but verify the numbers, right? You want to make sure, because sometimes maybe they've never bought a property before.
You don't ever want to trust the numbers.
Meaning you always have to go triple check. Just because they say it might be worth, or they might need this much repair, run your own numbers, because everyone's numbers are different.
There's a wide range when it comes to wholesalers, because there's no barrier of entry to wholesale, right? You can watch a YouTube video and it'll be a wholesaler. So there's wholesalers that are educated, that are very capable real estate investors that just can't rehab 7 houses at once.
Or they don't like rehabbing, so I'll sell you the ones that need extra work, right?
But then
Or
there's
whatever.
also wholesalers that watched a YouTube video, don't know the first thing about running numbers or rehab costs, and they're just sending out stuff. And then there's scumbags that'll find stuff on the MLS and try and sell it to you for $5,000 more than it's listed for. So I mean, there's
Yes.
a wide
There's a gamut.
range. But I mean, you can typically drill down pretty quickly on what's going on.
So you meet most of them through either attending other REIAs, meetups, or the one you
Facebook.
started.
I mean, they got Facebook Meet. They got all these different real estate
Groups.
Facebook groups, and you just see the ones they'll post them on there, and you just private message them and say, hey, I'm interested in this deal. Or, actually, I'm interested in all your deals. Here's my criteria. Send me everything you got.
I think it's important that you have your criteria, because I think if you're very specific on your criteria, how long did it take you to get that specific?
I mean,
It wasn't your first deal.
yeah, it wasn't my first deal.
Yeah,
I mean,
it took some time though. But here's the thing: is it's really helpful for wholesalers to know what you're looking for, because now that you're very specific.
yeah. Well, you know, I don't buy like lower income areas. Like I don't for a number of reasons.
But you did in the beginning,
Well, I mean, really,
technically.
I guess, yeah. I mean, but a $76,000 house in 2018 is not the same thing as a $76,000 house in 2020.
Sure, thank you, appreciation. But back then, was it a low income house?
I mean, back then I
Considered.
couldn't afford anything else.
But it was stepping stones, right?
Yeah.
And so those stepping stones help, right, to get to what you want to actually have.
So, I mean, yeah, it's evolved, and it'll continue to evolve. I
Yeah.
don't buy the smaller flips, you know, like the $100,000 houses, because, you know, my closing costs, my interest, my fixed costs kind of like squeeze the profitability out of it, you know.
So a lot of people asking, you know, how do you find such great deals? Are you 100% buying from wholesalers?
So I went on this kick last year maybe, where I would just throw in all these lowball offers on the MLS, and I got 2 or 3 of them. But
So what do you mean a whole bunch? Like, did you send 100 lowball offers and got 2 or 3, or was it like 10
I
offers?
probably sent like 10, but that was probably an anomaly, because like if you were to pull up the MLS today, you'd probably have to send 100 offers to get 2. I mean, for numbers that work, right? Because
Yeah.
it's just the insanity of the market at the moment. But I mean, of the 30 houses I've bought in the last calendar year, like I said, 2 or 3 of them came from the MLS, and the rest came from wholesalers.
I think it's important to note that he is willing to bank on wholesalers, whether they're brand new, whether they're experienced, whatever. He's saying, hey, I'm interested in run the numbers on those deals. I think a lot of people write off wholesalers because maybe they got burned by one because the numbers weren't right. And they're like, oh, you know, it's a waste of my time. But I'm actively buying from wholesalers right now,
So I
right?
got a funny story. There was a wholesaler that sent me a deal that was just terrible numbers. It was wrong, or I don't know what the deal was, but I guess I was having a bad day. I don't usually do this, but I guess I was having a bad day, and I kind of like snapped at him like via email. I was like, how much do you think this house is worth? Like, what's wrong with you, you know? I kind of snapped at him, and I don't remember doing that. But a few months later, he sent me a great deal. And I didn't know who this guy was or where he got my email from, but I called him when I got there, and I said, hey man, that's a great deal. I'd love to buy that from you. And he's like, okay, cool. So we got it under contract, and he's a good friend of mine now, and I've done a couple of deals with him. And but when I was searching my email by his name to see like the address, or for whatever reason I was looking for the email, I saw the email from a few months before where I'd like was totally rude to this guy. He sent me a terrible deal, and I was like, called him. I was like, dude, I'm sorry that I came at you like that last time. He goes, honestly, I almost didn't send you this one because of how you reacted to the last one. So, I mean, take that lesson for what it's worth. You know, just because somebody sends you a bad deal once doesn't mean they always will, and don't burn bridges.
So the real estate investor group's online. So if you guys aren't a part of, they have Southeast Louisiana Real Estate Investors Group on Facebook. That's the one that North Shore REIA runs, but there's so many other. I'm happy to point you to the other ones as well. We've got a few thousand people in that group, and it's moderated pretty heavily, so we don't have all the guys from India trying to sell you their uncle's fortune as a loan with the Gmail address and a WhatsApp number. So again, you've got to run those numbers for them. But wholesalers, I mean, it's a part of this industry that you don't want to sleep on. I mean, I buy from MLS, wholesalers, and direct to seller. I don't discriminate, right? Some seasons you're going to have a lot more in one than, I mean, you talked about last year was you had a stint on MLS, right? So that's awesome. I had a question here that said, your story is amazing. How do you find partners to go in on buying apartment complexes? How are you finding deals on apartment complexes? So it's a 2-part question. The partners on funding apartment. Can you share the size? So you've got the one, South Carolina or North?
Well, it's technically South Carolina. It's Rock Hill, South Carolina, but it's a submarket of Charlotte, North Carolina. So it's right on the border.
And how many units?
70 unit, and then
Okay.
we have a 54 unit in Newnan, Georgia, which is like 28.
That's the one you just closed on this year.
No, Atlanta was last year.
Okay.
Rock Hill was this year.
Okay.
So that's probably a whole nother conversation,
Sure.
presentation. But to start, I'll say, to find investors, that's like a culmination of everything you do with building your brand over years. You know, that was why I started the podcast, to establish myself as a thought leader in the industry and network with other thought leaders in the industry. It's a reason I post all of my projects on Facebook.
How many of you guys saw the post that I shared of his with how he was doing the closing you had yesterday? That post. So a lot of you guys saw that, and it was impactful, right? Every single time he does a closing, he does a post like that. I see him all the time. You want to know the flyer for this meeting is actually a picture of him at one of them with the closing thing, right? So,
Yeah, so
that's impactful.
Yeah, so I mean, I do a lot of that. I I had a bunch of people from my local meetup invest in their projects. I've had podcast guests invest in our projects. I've had podcast listeners reach out and invest in our projects. I go to a lot of conferences, multifamily conferences around the country. I had them invest in our projects. There's a whole lot of marketing also that I'm starting to launch with drip campaigns and driving traffic to my website, and we kind of manage it through Active Campaign. And I wrote a 15-page ebook on apartment syndications that I give away in exchange for people's emails, so I can reach out to them and talk to them about investing in the projects. So friends and family and Facebook friends.
Do you have a giveaway today?
I certainly can.
What's the name of the book?
So I'm actually changing the name of the book.
Have you not noticed that he takes action and then adjusts along the way? Anyone else picking up on that? Look what he just said. He said, "I'm about to change the name of the book."
It's so funny you say that, because I'm a big believer in that. I read a book when I was in school, and I always forget the name of it, but it's about that principle. It's about like...
Is it the ready, shoot, aim, or ready, aim, shoot, or whatever it's
No,
called?
but
Okay.
people always say that about me. It's I forget what it's called, but it's about a lot of big companies will go to market with something that they haven't spent tens of billions of dollars in R&D because they don't really know how the market's going to respond. They go with like a minimal ready and then get feedback from the market and then adjust to that. So the funny thing that you say, I have a binder. I'm redoing all my marketing stuff, and the label on the front of it is Marketing Launch 3.0, because it's like the third time I've redone it. But the original book, I don't remember what it was called. I can look it up.
So the name of the book that you have, your ebook, what was it called?
It was called Passive Investing, like everything you need to know about apartment syndications, and we're changing the name to...
So funny story, you guys have all heard of WD-40. Do you guys know that WD-40, what it stands for?
Water displacement.
Water displacement, and it was the 40th attempt. I kid you not. That's the they're like, just call it WD-40. And it stuck.
The new one is...
How would they get that ebook from you if they're interested in trading their email for that? Could they just reach out to
They
you?
could go to crestworthcapital.com and it like pops up. And there
Oh, you
should
can
be-
sign up for it on there. Okay.
Yeah, you can go to crestworthcapital.com. You can go to my Facebook and message me and ask me for it.
Yeah.
I can post it on.
Put it in the southeast. We'll have you put it in the
Southeast.
southeast. Yeah, the southeast Louisiana group.
We're changing the name to Private Real Estate Offerings, a busy professional's guide to passive wealth building.
There you go. That's cool.
So that's how I fund the apartment syndications. The way we find them is I have some partners out of New York actually, and they handle most of the acquisition side, and then I handle a lot of the fundraising side, and then we share the duties on the
Operating side.
But they have a virtual assistants that they have cold calling direct owners, and that was how we sourced Newnan, is they called the owners of the Newnan project, and they also have created a framework to train the virtual assistants to bulk underwrite. So, you know, we have brokers sending us hundreds of deals a week, but we can only underwrite like 10 deals a week.
Yeah.
I mean, I could underwrite a single family house in the back of a napkin, you know, without
An
a
apartment,
pen.
yeah.
But an apartment with all these different levers and different, you know,
So-
it's a
Because it was a 70 unit, and then the new one is a 50 unit?
Yeah, the old one's a 54 unit and the new one's a 70 unit.
Yeah, those are bigger deals, right? That takes a little bit more than a napkin.
We have the virtual assistants bulk underwrite, and then they'll only send us like 1 out of 10. So it allows
helps.
us to, you know.
It's a system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how we found those.
Are you putting those deals in your personal name or are they in the LLC?
I'm sorry?
Are you putting the deals in your personal name or the LLC?
So I don't own anything in my personal name. All of my stuff's in the LLCs.
How many of them do you have? Like, do you have one for flips, one for rentals?
So I am in the process of getting better.
Catch on to the theme here, guys, huh?
Yeah, so when I started, I had 2 LLCs. I had one LLC for that fourplex and those 2 duplexes that me and my brother had together, and that was called Chapman Rental Properties LLC. And then and we had to have that separate because we were 50-50 on those 8 units. And then I had Serenity Home Solutions where I bought, you know, the first few properties, and then the next few properties, and then the next few. And then I looked up and I had like 75 in there, and my CPA and lawyer were like, "You gotta fix this." So we're moving the flip properties into a new LLC, and because we want to tax it as an S corp because it helps us with self-employment tax. And then we're moving some of the lower income duplexes and fourplexes into their own LLC because they have low equity and a higher risk. And then we're putting a lot of the higher end single family houses in a separate one because they have a ton of equity. And we don't want somebody to slip and fall, you know, one of the duplexes and then get access to the 100K equity in each one of these houses.
But I think there's a principle to be had here that Sterling has not been afraid to take action and learn more along the way and correct his. I think so many people think they have to have 100% correct up front, but he's adjusting along the way.
Yeah, well, people get kind of wilded out about, like, I've seen people spend a month, like, designing their logo for their LLC and they don't have a house. And the same thing with asset protection. Like, in the early days, I didn't need asset protection because I didn't have any assets.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I feel like if you're trying to come up with an asset protection strategy and you've got like $8,000 to your name, you need to focus on
Well, no.
something else.
I think that's really important. So one resource for you guys, if you guys go to Courtney10k.com, so Courtney10k.com, it's just a whole bunch of links. The top right link is the YouTube channel for the REIA. There is a video, there's maybe 100 videos at this point on our YouTube. This will go on there later, you know, tomorrow. But there's a what every investor needs to know about entities video that we did with the real estate specific CPA and real estate attorneys who spoke on a lot of different recommendations because I did the same thing as you. I got started doing everything in one entity and then I finally found a capable CPA and he was like, all right, let's sit down and let's unwind what you did, right? But it's helpful.
Realistically, like, people get carried away with that. Now, when we do like our apartment complexes, that's a little bit more of a complex structure. You know, we do a single purpose LLC, we're the general partners, we're limited partners, and like that's the only, like, we don't want anything encroaching on that individual business because an apartment complex is a business. But you know, when I first started buying, the first few houses I bought were in my personal name. And I mean, really, if you have good liability insurance, like that, I mean, that's really all you need. Like I've since moved them to the LLC, and I like them in the LLC for no other reason they don't appear on my credit report. So I mean, you look at my credit report, I don't have anything on there because it's all in Serenity's name. So my social's clean, you know.
So speaking of, so when you do the BRRRR method, so you buy it with cash from someone or some, you know, you renovate them, you're using someone's cash for that, and then you're putting a tenant in there, and then you go ahead and you then refinance it. Are you able to first of all, can you talk about, do you refinance it into your LLC? Because a lot of people, when they go to do the BRRRR, then they're stuck, the type of loan they get is making them keep it in their individual name. Can you talk about what type of loan you use now pretty commonly?
So I have a rant about loans, lending products, and lending institutions that is very important to note. If a bank does not do a certain type of loan, they will tell you that nobody will do that type of loan. And they are either stupid or lying, and either way I don't want to work with them.
Tell me how you really feel.
So with my first deal with those duplexes, I went to 26 different banks, and the first 25 told me nobody would do that. They're wrong. Somebody will always do it. There are so many different lending products available in the country, from private money to hard money to asset-based lending to small local banks. So we typically, what I find is newer investors fall into this trap of this very, very narrow view of lending products. They'll look at like what their cousin who's a mortgage broker whose company only allows them to peddle these loans that are backed by Fannie and Freddie, and they have to check these boxes, and you can only buy an investment property with 20% down, it's got to be a higher interest rate, and your debt to income has to be this, and you have to show all these bank statements, and you can't pay off your credit card, and we need to give you this, and we need to get you check that. And that is a very, very small area of people that lend money. If you go to Chase or Capital One or Regions, they'll sell you that same crap. But then you go to like a small local bank who keeps their loans on their own books, and well, they make the rules. They don't have somebody in corporate making the rules, checking these boxes, and they can do all kind of creative stuff. And then they've got these asset-based lenders that don't even ask to see your W-2, don't even ask to see your tax returns. All they care about is what the debt service coverage ratio of the property is, and what the ARV is, what it appraises for.
So, so as far as some local lenders, so portfolio lenders, Heritage Bank is a good one on the North Shore. Do you have any portfolio lenders, like the small regional banks you'd recommend?
In Baton Rouge, I like Peoples and I like Citizens, and then I use, as an asset-based lender, I like Louisiana Capital.
So asset-based lenders, they're going to look more at the asset. So Ryan Camesso, his card is out front, as well as a flyer. He's an asset-based lender who does a lot down here as far as lending. He also does hard money, but asset-based is where you can buy it in the LLC name, and they're looking at the asset. They might run your credit score, but they're not going to pit the loan on your credit, on your personal credit. Any other questions?
So I don't think I answered your original question about what I typically.
Oh, yeah.
So with the BRRRR of the houses, I buy the house either with private money, so my money, private money, or the bank's money. So I have, my own cash, and then I have some private money lenders, some investor friends of mine that want to return on their capital. So I say, hey, give me $100 grand, I'll give you 120 at the end of the year. So I've got some of their money, some of my money, and so if the house really needs to close in 6 days, we'll take that money and we'll go close it just to take control of the asset. And then typically what I'll do is I'll go to a small local bank and say, if that's the case and all my money's tied up in it, I'll rehab it as quick as I can. And I can typically rehab it in a month. And then I'll go to a small local bank and I'll say, hey, give me 80% of the ARV, and then they'll write me a check for usually more than I got tied up in it. And then the other way is, if they don't have to close, some of my lenders will go, some of my small local banks, they'll fund the whole closing and escrow as long as it's under 80% of the ARV, and they'll do it that way. Once I collect about 4 or 5 of those loans in those small local banks books, they get kind of squirmy when I get to about $1 million with them. And so that's when I move them all off to the asset-based loans. And asset-based is unlimited. They don't care about my credit report. They check my credit, I think, but they don't care about my W-2.
There's no
they don't
limit,
care about my debt
yeah.
to income. There's no limit. They're just investing in the assets. So it's unlimited. And it's a 30-year fixed, whereas with the small local banks, I call it crappy debt. It's 20-year AM, 5-year balloon. So not only do you have not the best cash flow because you only got a 20-year AM, but you got the risk of owing the whole loan in 5 years, which I don't like to sit in that area. So I typically, as quick as I can, move them over to those asset-based 30-year fixed loans if I'm going to keep them, long term. And so that's my process.
So we've got about 10 more minutes with him. So if you guys have questions, this is a good time. Here's one. It says, you probably already talked about this, but I'm 22 and trying to get started. How'd you get started, and what's the best way to go about it with not having huge mistakes? I know you shared about some, so I am going to say go back and watch some, but any general tips for people getting started? Because you got started and you've put a dent in, that more people could hope to have the type of, success and track record that you've had in the last few years. But what do you say to someone who's looking to get started today?
Well, we're coming from a different place. So I had a pretty well established job, and I was 30 when I started investing. So if I was 22 and didn't have like a successful job and wasn't married, I would have house hacked like a fourplex or a duplex with an FHA loan.
Okay.
So that's what I tell every 21-year-old I meet is, dude, you can go buy like a duplex or a fourplex with 3% down, and you can live in one unit, and you can live there for free because the other units are paying for your mortgage and you're making money on top of that. A year later, you can go do it again. A year later, you can go do it again. And by the time you're 25, you can have 16 units and be, making $5,000 a month.
Cole on my team, a lot of you guys know Cole. Cole's 20 years old. He started coming to these meetings at 17. At 18 years old, the morning he turned 18, at like 2 a.m., he applied for a credit card to start building credit. And he ended up buying some of my old rental properties from someone in California I sold them to, but he's now up to 3 properties at 20, house hacking. And I mean, to the point where one of them, he couldn't find any doubles in this hot market, so he bought a single family home and he's renting the other rooms. So you can, I love that. I love recommending that.
So normally y'all wait 6 months to refinance. Are you doing that too?
Or what?
So
Yeah,
That's what that little bank told you. You gotta go to somebody else. I bet they told you nobody else will make you wait that too. They're lying to you. So, is the short answer. If you use regions, or if you use like, GSFS or whatever, that those like kind of mainstream consumer-based lenders that obey the Fannie Mae guidelines because they're going to sell those loans in the secondary market, they do make you wait 6 months before you do a cash out refinance if you're going to do it that way in your personal name. I do a cash out refinance after like 3 weeks.
So with that being said, someone's a private lender. You're saying, hey, 100,000. You've got 100,000. At the end of the year, I'll give you 20 grand. Are you in the same year because you're cashing out? Maybe you have a lifespan of 4 months in a deal or 2 months in a deal because you buy it, you renovate it within a month or whatever.
I got a lifespan of 30 days.
30 days in. So are you using that 100 grand on other deals? So that 20. So this is a really important part. Do you guys see what he just said?
People are like, you're crazy. You spend 20% of the money. So
yeah.
2020,
Anyone here said 20% on the money and like, right? Okay.
All right. In 2020, I did 4 deals, which is I've done 9 in the last 3 months. So 4 deals in a year is nothing, right? In those 4 deals, in the first deal I told you all about, the first BRRRR of 2020, I was all in for 90 and it appraised for 130, so that's 40,000. The second one, I was all in for like 125 and it appraised for 209. So that's 70 plus the 30. So now we're at 100. Then the third deal was 60K. So now we're at 160. And then the fourth deal was,
Good on you for remembering the numbers.
the fourth deal was, I bought it from Taylor actually, for 70. And I was all into it for 110 and it appraised at 180. So that was 70 plus, what was the first three added up to?
160.
So 230. So yeah, I paid $20,000, but I made $230,000. So
you understand the power of velocity? So some people get caught up on what interest rate you're paying to a lender, but okay, if someone has $1,000 in the bank and they're making less than 1%, to give them a 20% return, in the stock market, sometimes you can make a 7 to a 10% annualized, right? So even then, hey, at the end of the year. So with that, but here's the thing is, so for some people, they've got that money problem. They want to find someone who would pay. Look, there's probably people in this room right now that said, I'll give you 100 grand for 20% at the end of the year, right? That works out for me. So it's finding those people, and you guys have them in your relationships, right?
I got more money than I got deals.
I bet they don't want their money back.
Well, they don't.
Keep it for another year.
Hey, do that. Can you do that again? How many times? So have you ever had people who are like, hey, how many, can we keep doing this again the next year?
Yeah, so everybody pretty much does that. And the only exception is if people want to roll their money into the apartment complex, which that's, I guess, a more complex conversation, but speaking to the point of velocity of money. So our investors in our apartment complex, in the last two deals we did, we refinance and return all the capital at 18 months, and they stay in the deal. So if you look at, they're averaging, 25% over the lifespan of the deal over the 5 years or whatever. They're 2.5x in their money, but they get all their invested capital back out at 18 months, so they can go redeploy it somewhere else.
Right.
And then 18 months later, they get it back. So they got their money working in 3 different deals. So that same 100,000 can turn into 250 here, can turn into 250 here, can turn into 250 here. So you turn 100,000 into 750,000 because that velocity of money, when you can keep reapplying
It's the speed of doing
and have
it, yeah.
it working in multiple places at once, it can kind of grow exponentially like a
The
hockey
average person's biggest problem is they can't get their money working for them. They don't want to put in that work. The work it takes to find a deal that gives you the return, or to find what's in the market that gives you that type of return. So most people are looking for capable practitioners and operators who can give them that return, right? And so so if you've heard him, he's talked about a few things. He very intentionally is building his credibility and his brand, right? On social media. If you guys aren't following Sterling, you can go Sterling Chapman on Facebook and then Rent Roll Radio as well. He's sharing. Every time he does a closing, he shares. Hey, just bought another one. It's worth this. Like, he literally breaks down the numbers, right? So if you have money on the sideline and you're watching him from the sideline, I've had plenty of people who they don't like my stuff. They don't comment on my stuff on social media.
message you.
But hey, I've been watching you for a few years. Hey, all the time it happens, and I'm like,
How can I
can't
get
share
in?
alike. I'm just kidding. But you never know. You never know who's watching, right? I had someone who I used to be a CrossFit coach for years ago reach out to me, like, oh yeah, I pay attention to every one of yours. I'm like,
so funny you say that. If you share it to your story, you do know who's watching. 'Cause they'll
Okay.
show you everybody that
Yeah.
watched.
yeah, no, but you understand? Some of you guys
Carl,
are
I see you seeing me.
okay, but some of you guys are sleeping on social media. You seriously, social media is a very active part of the business plan, and he's talked about it's a big part of his business plan too.
Yeah,
It's very intentional.
It is insane how it allows us to market in this day and age. When you think about what people would have to do in the 90s to reach the masses in that way, the amount of money they would spend on TV.
AOL live chat, messenger groups.
It's a whole different game. Did somebody raise their hand in the
Yeah,
back?
I have a concern about the HOA with duplexes and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
It eats your cash flow.
I
not all HOA, not all duplexes have,
HOAs.
yes.
I mean, none of mine do.
And how many duplexes and fourplexes do you have?
Huh?
How many fourplexes and duplexes do you have?
I have 3 fourplexes and 11 duplexes.
And none of them have HOAs. So it's really gonna matter, you know, I own a condo that I'm selling right now. I didn't want to keep in my portfolio because of the HOA. But then again, one of my first mentors had 40 properties that were all condos within HOAs. Teach their own. You've got to figure out what you like.
So my property manager, my first property manager was a friend of mine who managed a bunch of properties of his own in North Baton Rouge. And then I just got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore, and he said he would take them. And then he fired me after about a year, just because he couldn't handle mine. Like, you know, he would manage for his friends, a couple properties here, a couple properties there. But I dumped 28 on him, and like 18 months later it was 70. He's like, all right.
Any last final questions for him, guys? I want to make sure he's got to drive back to Baton Rouge, so I want to make sure I respect his time and y'all's.
What's your goal with real estate? What's your
Ooh, that's an
your
excellent
goal?
question.
What's my goal?
Reside in 2 years.
Whether it's 5, 10, in goal.
Are you still employed right now?
I am.
A W-2?
I am. So my goal, well, I'm actually very clear on my goals, and I'm very intentional about my goals, and I don't mind sharing them. I write my goals down every day, and I just encourage you all to as well. So my goal for the second quarter is to get 8 more houses under contract and raise $2 million for our next apartment project. My goal for 2022 is to buy 40 houses and do 3 apartment syndications to bring my net worth to $3.6 million, my net passive cash flow to $216,000, and have $300,000 in cash reserves. And then my 3-year goal is to have 250 legacy units, like single family and duplexes, 2,500 syndicated units, and be doing 50 houses and raising $10 million a year in private equity.
I did have one question. Since you seem to like, I mean, you're just kind of new in multifamily. Do you see an advantage or just between the two of being a, do you like that you're probably your houses you own fully and then the apartment complex your partners? Do you find you like multifamily better or you like both?
So I like both.
Okay.
And most people that I know that started single family, when they move to multifamily, they'll just kind of abandon their single family
Right.
and just go all in on the multifamily. I personally have got a really good system and a really good network. I have my own guys fixing all the properties. I have a bunch of wholesalers sending me properties. It's a great way to generate cash to fund the large multifamily projects because it's a very cash intensive business. So like, it's true you raise other people's capital, but realistically, like, my investors feel comfortable when I invest alongside them.
Well,
So
but also to do due diligence on multifamily.
These
significant.
projects, I mean, you're talking like $200,000 deposit.
Mm-hmm.
And then
And-
you're talking a $20,000 to have the lawyer draw up the syndication docs and put together the PPM. We're talking, $10,000 in due diligence reports. So it's a very cash intensive business. But I love my partners with the large multifamily. I believe that I'll end up making 10 times the wealth in multifamily that I do in single family. I'll tell you, I like the diversity of both. I do like feeling comfortable that I have these that I own and it's just me, but then I also love all of the growth and potential of, and another thing about, we never really talked about this, but another thing about the apartment complexes, I mean, there's a lot of great things about the apartment complexes. I mean, there's just economies of scale. It's so much easier to manage. They're all under one roof. But we're buying them in markets that are much better than the market we live in.
We actually just had a long conversation at dinner about this.
I don't syndicate apartment complexes in South Louisiana for a plethora of reasons. The first thing we decide to do when we decide whether we're going to buy apartment complexes, we underwrite the market. So is it poised for long-term growth? And the answer with pretty much every city in Louisiana is no, right? So the first thing we look at is population growth. Like we want to know, is there going to be rental demand down the road? Are people moving here? Is the city growing? And we have negative migration in South Louisiana. Then we look at job growth. Our jobs, are they adding jobs? Is there going to be people that can afford the rent? And we have declining job growth in South Louisiana. Then we look at job diversity. So like the goal here is you don't want to own property in Detroit when the auto industry decides to go overseas, right? Because now those $70,000 houses are worth about $3. Well, we're at very high risk because of the oil industry in South Louisiana. So if you look at the markets that we buy in, like Charlotte, North Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, those are very diverse from an industry standpoint and a company standpoint. One company going out of business is not really going to affect the local economy or the rental demand. One industry going down isn't really going to affect the local economy or the rental demand or the growth drivers in that economy, in that local economy. We also look at median household income, we look at median household price, we look at poverty levels, we look at crime levels, and we're just not, we don't really check any of the boxes down
So
here.
then you try to partner with someone local for boots on the ground in those areas to help you,
So
or you're just searching for a good property management team?
we have a national property management team that has somebody on site. I fly out to the properties, 3 or 4 times before we buy it through the due diligence process. We have, local property managers,
So you're B class or A class, is that what you're?
No, we do value add. So
Oh,
the
okay.
way we do these apartment complexes, I've recently done some videos in this marketing. I post them on Facebook if y'all want to go look at them. But what we do is we don't just like buy them and hope they go up in value. Like we know they're undervalued when we buy them, and so we buy them and we force the appreciation. It's basically like a 5-year flip, right? And so the way you value apartment complexes is you take the net operating income, so the revenue minus the expenses, the net operating income, and you divide it by the capitalization rate. So the capitalization rate is the unlevered return. If you bought the apartment complex with cash, what ROI would you get? So there's a pretty standard capitalization rate with different asset classes in different markets. A typical one is around 5%. So I always, when I talk about what we do, I always use the example of a 50-unit apartment complex. Let's say you buy a 50-unit apartment complex for $3 million. You're going to put $1 million down, right? So I'm going to take $1 million. You're going to give me $1 million, and I'm going to put it down as a down payment to buy a $3 million 50-unit apartment complex. And then I raise the rent $100 a unit. So that's not hugely impactful, right? If you live somewhere and they said, hey, the rent's going up $100, you'd be like, oh, well, it's just inflation, cost of doing business. So, but if you raise the rent on each unit, 50 units times $100 a unit, that's $5,000 a month times 12 months, that's $60,000. You just increase the net operating income by $60,000. And if you divide that $60,000 increase to the net operating income by 0.05, you just created $1.2 million in value. Right, so that $3 million apartment complex is now worth $4.2 million.
Right.
So I'll sell it for the $4.2 million, and then we'll pay off our $2 million loan, and then I'll give you your $1 million back, and then I'll give you the other $1 million, and then I'll stick $200 grand in my pocket.
At 5 years, you're keeping the partners in, or you're getting them out? Like you're.
But 5 years we're going to sell it, right?
Okay,
But-
so it's not buy and hold. That's not.
Not. A lot of time, like with our last 2 deals, we did the value add on the front end, and then we did a cash out refinance and returned our investors initial capital, and we kept them in the deal until we ended up selling. So that's how you can kind of get that velocity of money and redeploy it in another deal. But our investors are in the deal as long as we're in the deal. So we're in it together from beginning to.
So they're happy, right?
I have a quick question.
So one thing is next month, we're gonna have Trent, who's gonna come do, and how many of you guys would want me to ask him to come back and talk more about the apartment, right? You guys getting a twofer tonight. All right, we'll text more about that and talk more about that, but having you come later on the year to talk more about on the apartment side, because if you catch what he's talking about, he's doing that in the single family space too, right? Buying undervalued properties and forcing the appreciation over time. And he's either flipping them or he's refinancing them with a loan, getting all that money back, paying back investors and loans and things like that, and then getting long-term financing on them and having, he called them legacy properties. You guys heard that, right? Legacy properties, keeping those single families. It's very similar concept to what you're doing, and then when you do it in multifamily, there's ways you can do it on a larger scale. Any last dying questions? I'll let you ask your.
I have a complicated one, but I won't ask that. I have a simple one. The simple one is, when you're talking about having bought 9 properties this year, is that nationwide or are you buying somewhat locally?
That's local.
All of your,
Okay.
apart from your apartment complexes, all of your single families and doubles, where are they located?
The greater Baton Rouge area, so
Okay.
I've got, most of them are in Baton Rouge, I've got a handful in Baker, a handful in Ascension Parish, I got one in LaPlace, one in Metairie, but, yeah, that area.
Because you started buying down near some in the Metairie and even in the North
I
Reading.
mean, you know, if I find a good apartment complex in another state, I'll fly to it 6 times, you know, look at it. I can't justify flying across the country to look at a single family house. And I know the markets here, right? Like I know it like the back of my hand. Like you can make money in any market. I'm not saying don't own property in South Louisiana. I own a ton of property in South Louisiana. I'm just saying like, you know, when you're spending $10 million on an apartment complex, you typically want to make sure the wind's at your back and everything is in your favor. So you want to, your best bet is to place that in a local economy that is poised for long-term growth. Now you can, I mean, there's people making money buying apartment complexes in South Louisiana. They don't have all the chips stacked together. Now, that being said, they can probably get a better discount because they don't have those.
Because there's not the
Now,
big buyers.
I buy houses here because I know the neighborhood's like the back of my hand. People are always gonna wanna live in XYZ neighborhood, you know? It may be dangerous down the street, and on the macro, we may be dangerous as a state or a city, but like, there's still that safe area. And like, houses are always gonna go up there because people don't wanna live there, they wanna live here. And, you know,
So, Sterling, what are ways that people can stay in touch with you? Follow you online?
there's a lot. So I have Facebook, Sterling Chapman. I have Instagram. I think it's the handle's Rent Roll Radio. And then I have, you know, you can go to my website, crestworthcapital.com. You can email me, sterling@crestworthcapital.com.
Can you clarify, you're saying Crestworth?
Crestworth. Yeah, let me write it in.
I picked that up, but I can, so Crestworth, C-R-E-S-T, Worth, W-O-R-T-H, capital. And then what I'll do is I'll in the group, I'll let you kind of share in the, where people can get the ebook.
Yep.
Hey, I know, I want to give these out. So anything else you want to share with people? You've shared a lot tonight. Obviously, we'll talk more about getting you back sometime later this year. Anything else you want to leave people with tonight?
Yeah, I mean, the mechanics of the business are relatively easy. What I find is that the secret sauce to being successful in it is 2 things. It's networking like crazy and, you know, trying to give more in every relationship than you're trying to take. You know, I always try and leave something on the table. With my wholesalers, I don't haggle with them. And if it's a good enough deal, they just happen to offer me a good enough deal. Sometimes I show up with a bonus check for them. I pay my guys extra. I mean, I do everything I can because, you know, I have met some people that are real shrewd negotiators,
Yeah.
and they think that's what makes them a good business person, to get every penny from the other guy. That's wrong. What makes you a good business person is developing relationships with people that want to do business with you over and over again. So the wholesalers line up to bring me the deals before they bring them to those shrewd negotiators because they know I'll take care of them. So it's just a mutually beneficial. So I always leave something on the table when I'm given the opportunity. The other thing is a lot of this business is just mindset. Any business, any type of thing you want to be successful at is just mindset and developing your mindset. And because you're going to run into roadblocks and people are going to discourage you, and you're going to get discouraged, and you just have to keep persevering. So I've always been real big in developing the right mindset with, you know, podcasts, audiobooks, regular books, just, you know, masterminding with other people, you know. So mindset and relationships is the key.
Y'all, give it up to him. It was really valuable. You guys go. You know what, my man, did I give you a book last time? Because I remember I think I ran out. Did I give you a book? You want to pick? I ended up giving you one? Okay. Who here remembers Sterling's buy box? Anyone remember his very specific criteria of what he wants to buy when it comes to a single family property?
7%.
Oh. Catch it. No. All right. Who here can raise their hand and tell me, because he said 70% all in plus what? Raise your hand and let me know, because the whole saying it all at the once was not.
Repairs.
Okay, 70% including the repairs, but he also gave a value of homes. You remember?
It was 150 to 200,000.
175.
175.
Yeah, 175.
I mean, you can pick, I have three. Which one?
Dealer's choice.
The first one, have a hand on. All right. Hey guys, who here has done their first BRRRR deal this year? Raise your hand. Hi, buddy. Which one? All right, he did the other one. Okay, with this one. Yo, I promise you, the hardest deal of the night is me figuring out who to get the deal thing about to. And you guys see, I usually try to be like, here, what are you doing? Hey, look, guys, connect with Sterling. I hope did you guys take some principles away from tonight? If you guys realize, look, he's taking action and figuring it out and correcting along the way. Don't get stuck where everything has to be perfect, okay? And then, so you heard his buying criteria. You understand he's buying down here, but also in Baton Rouge. So keep him in mind if you come across deals, realtors and wholesalers. Guys, the list of the deals are over here. If you go to CourtneyTinK.com, so that's my business card online digitally. Top left link has the upcoming events, so it has all of those. For example, the details for that Zoom call for the deals, the next Wednesday's mobile home class here in this place. On the top right, though, it has the YouTube where if you want to come back and listen again or listen to other ones. Thank you guys so much for coming. That also is where there's the Facebook, the Southeast Louisiana Real Estate Investor Group. Look, check out the information out there. I know some of you guys were asking about the asset-based lenders. Ryan Camesso's card's out there if you want to check that out too. Have a safe night, guys. Have a great Easter. Thanks for coming. Have a good one, y'all.